Everybody, welcome to the Rainmaker Show. I'm here with Patty, and we're excited to bring you this episode. And we're going to be talking a little bit about money and the life cycle of the client and how that works and what the process looks like, how the sales interviewing skills not only just apply on the front end, but continue to need to be applied throughout the life cycle of the client. And so this is critically important if you're going to try to make yourself a coach for life, build a relationship with another person professionally, and stay alongside them as their health, wellness, fitness, exercise, professional advocate, whatever you want to call yourself, for as long as they live in your community. So I know it's an important topic for Patty as well.
Yeah. How you doing, Gregor?
Doing good. How are you doing?
Good, man. Good. Finally got some sun back here in Vancouver. We've had wildfires. It's been like a smoke festival here.
Wow, that's scary, man. Can you see the fires?
Well, no, you can't see the fires. They're pretty far away, but the smoke gets in here, and you certainly can see the smoke. It's kind of like there's been a cloud. Like some of the towns, like the streetlights stay on all day, but here it's not so bad. Anyway, Mother Ocean has cleaned us out. So yeah, topic of today. I was just going to talk about the client development life cycle. So we did a study with Zen Planner with 1,600 gyms. And, this was in 2014-15. And we'd been, trialing and erroring this thing in our gym for almost 10 years up to that point. And we'd been trial and erroring it with other gyms. And what we found was pretty dramatic. As soon as you bring someone in to do, an assessment, an evaluation, set up a game plan, i.e. their first bit of training, like the one-on-one versus if you did a group on-ramp, a 5-on-1. We found that no matter what the skill level of the coach, whether it was across 500 gyms, 200 gyms, even 10 gyms, they kind of all scaled out the same. Is that as soon as you went above that one-on-one, there was like a huge jump of churn, right? And then it was almost like a logarithmic scale where if you had on one axis you had coach to student ratio. On the other axis, you had yearly churn, right? And you coach a student ratio of 1, that churn rate stays pretty low. You get to 2, you get to 3, and it's just like, it doesn't quite reach infinity, but it goes right against the bumper. If you started bringing on 50 at 1, what would that churn rate look like? And it's amazing to me. I still get attacked online and people want to argue with me, but I mean, it should be pretty damn obvious that if you work on one-on-one with someone, it's going to be more effective than 2-on-1, 3-on-1, 5-on-1, and that level of effectiveness dwindles as you get less and less and less of that person, And I think what scares people the most is, it's kind of always been done that way, and people have been, bringing in the group on-ramps and trying to sell those for cheap, or now it's like it's a 6-week challenge, and they've raised the price on that to $500, I think, but it's a deposit you pay later, and it's bait and switchy. But Greg, maybe talk about, people are a little bit fearful. What I hear from people, and it's funny when they get in their system, that seems to be the first thing they can figure out. But what is it around the fear of people having, like, they want to argue with me that the 5-on-1 works, and they know instinctively anybody can do math. They know that one-on-one is going to be way more effective for client retention and average client value, the two most important things. So maybe talk about why that fear exists and how we get over that.
Well, one, I think I appreciate that. I think that one is, what do they mean by client retention? And what's the start and end point of what they call retained client? Because, if you're trying to be in a professional relationship with your clients, it's very difficult to be in a professional relationship with 50 or 60 or 70 people. If you hadn't already established a one-on-one relationship with them going in, you just don't get to know your clients if they just come in, in mass, kind of the polygamist model, right? Of how many wives can you really handle, right? And so that doesn't seem to be working out too well for a lot of families. But I think that, again, the fear is probably in the amount of time it takes and the perceived trade-off in time in terms of what a one person paying you for 1/2 hour or 1 hour of work versus 5 people paying you, for that same hour. And because I see this in personal training in the gyms here in my town in Columbus, all around the country as well, is this whole idea of small group training, right? Because they want to get more money per unit time.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a short-term expediency gain for the long-term pain of not having a professional relationship and being able to deal with and identify the unique individual needs of each person. And so it's hard to backtrack from starting with 5, 7, 8, 10 people, realizing, oh my goodness, these people have individual needs. How do I deal with them in the group session? You really can't. You try, and that starts stealing time away from somebody else, and they can see that. And they can feel that their own individual needs aren't being met, and they start leaving, right? And so, I think the biggest issue in science, right, is honest observation, and whether or not coaches and owners are willing to be honest observers about their own practice. And this takes courage and character to really look at the data and say, you know what, this really just doesn't work. Our practice is like an emergency room. You're just sitting around waiting for waves of the sick to come in, and then they leave. Once you fix them up and patch them up, then you have waves of time where you're doing nothing. You're bored out of your mind. And so it's a tough psychological place to go, which is to think about the long term, the long game, and systematically building high quality relationships one-on-one initially so that you can manage them in group later on more effectively. And in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, now you've got a high quality practice filled with a lot of people who want to stay, and you know why they want to stay. But if all you're thinking about is hopscotching from every 4, 6, 8 week training window with people, you're on a pretty fast treadmill. It's hard to stay on.
Yeah. And then you graduate those people after 6 weeks or whatever that group on-ramp is into a bigger class, and they get further lost. So tell me about this 3-day. Sorry, it looked like you were gonna say something there.
Well, I mean, it's happening to the coaches now. You know that it is, right? They start a class. They're looking at 12 people, whatever it is. They start taking them through the movements, and they see what's wrong. They see these people struggling, right? They see the ones that seem to be doing well, and they see the ones that are not doing well, and they're trying to figure out how to juggle all that. And if you have even 2 people in there that are really struggling, and you have to spend tons of energy on them, you are ignoring the other ones by default. There's just no doubt about it.
Yeah, that's the other sad part of that. Like, we had one of our gyms recently try one of the the group on-ramp challenges, and we interviewed the coaches, and they're like, oh my God, there's only 2 or 3 that made it through that big group, but I just see how poorly they moved. I see my failure as a coach. Like, for those listening that don't know, what we found from our data is, if you do 15, 18, 25, the average person, or 80% of the people that come into a functional fitness gym, they do about 18 personal training sessions before they reach a competency where they can continue on a group and then see their coach once a week or once a month, or, something like that, where we see there's a huge, gigantic difference if you do that personal assessment and you develop a plan for them. And then you can combine it with group very effectively, right? I know some groups say, you got to be in one-on-one training forever, but we haven't found that. We found that we can have 90% retention rates if people, do 20 personal training sessions and then see their coach once a month. We have really high retention rates, and then, average client values of $275 to $300. So the whole thing works for the client, the coach, and the owner. But let's just talk about that fear of what that, trying to sell that high level service. Because I think a lot of people who haven't sold one-on-one, services or relationships have a fear around that. How do you break that fear? I know you have a 20-hour course is why we're, to do all that, but maybe touch upon that for those listening, the fear of that, selling that service.
Yeah. I wish I could, deal with that easily. It's a difficult problem to deal with, in that you're talking about an individual psycho-emotional makeup. They're the very core of their personality, and there is something very unique and special about the sales process that flushes out the self-esteem and the confidence issues that someone might have under the surface. And so many of us want to please people, and we want to help people, and the sales process is just perceived so negatively by both parties that it's not set up for success. And so I think the fear that people have, the anger and the frustration around the selling process is one, their own personality foibles and self-esteem issues and confidence issues, and two, how they want to be perceived by the public, and that's a perception of what the sales process is. It's unfortunate that it's negative, and we spend a lot of time in the course talking about why that is, and then working to overcome it and change the frame. So, that's the thing, is trying to get coaches and owners to change the way they think about themselves first, and what they are in the community and what they can bring to the community and the value that is, and then they can interact with strangers in their local neighborhoods and talk about what they do. And the commodity mindset is not only pervasive on the consumer side. Coaches and owners think of themselves as being commodities and retail shelf items. That's why they hopscotch from boot camp to 4 week, 6 week offerings, and why it doesn't work, and the consumer thinks about that. And so that's what I think the big problem is, in terms of fears and doubts and hesitancies people have about going out and talking to people that are in their communities about what they do. If you're not confident about what you offer, if you wouldn't pay the prices that you charge, there is a huge problem.
Yeah.
And you got to look inside and figure out why that is. If you wouldn't pay for your own services, you shouldn't be charging it.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of it stems from. People have especially the way that CrossFit has been perceived. When I started, it was personal training. That's all Greg did. It was personal training. He was $100 an hour, and he started combining people, but he didn't combine them first day. You know what I mean? Or you had a group that probably trained together for 7 years, and they brought in one person and pretty much personally trained them while the group was kind of going on, because they were all really well trained. And he didn't do. It was a totally different model. And then when this thing kind of went mainstream, the old broken aerobics sort of group class thing allowed for such rapid growth and expansion of that whole movement that it became the sort of the standard. So people are like, now I see people saying, I want to try this, moving to the one-on-one, and oh God, what could I charge? And I'm actually usually always amazed at how quickly they can sell 10 personal training sessions for like $750, or a 3-day assessment for $250. And actually, it's amazing how fast, when they ask for it and they deliver it, like, they actually don't realize how good they really are. Most new people into our group, they realize, they've undervalued themselves, and they don't know if they'd be worth it, but they sit down with a person one-on-one, and all the knowledge they have and their abilities come across, and then they ask for the sale, and they're like, holy mackerel, I just sold $750 for 10 sessions, or, $265, $250, or $249, whatever it is, for 3 sessions, and this kind of thing. And it's amazing how fast that happens. Like, what tends to be even harder is to teach other people how to do it. Right now we've got a big thread. Emily's been writing all this stuff about our coach compensation, and how, you really need to compensate that coach based on a few things, but 2 things. One is, is the client sticking around? Because if they're leaving, then, you want to have your incentives paid directly. Are they sticking around, and how much are they paying? If they're paying $10 an hour, well, you're not going to get much of a living. But if they're paying $100 an hour, it's probably a decent living, right? Yeah.
It's a value proposition. And so how valuable someone holds out their own health is ultimately the key. Everybody knows. I doubt there's very many places on the planet we can't go and do a little survey on the street asking people if they know exercise is something they should be doing regularly and eating better.
Yeah.
I would be amazed to even hear one person say, "No, I never heard of that, man. I never heard of exercise before and eating good."
Yeah.
It's crazy. So people know this. And the question is, how much do they value their own health? And this is what the sales interview and the assessment process and the early stages of the relationship are. This is where all the heavy lifting occurs, is really trying to flush out how much value is for this person. Because if they're not really interested in their health, even though they know exercise is good, there's a lot of people who smoke and they read the side of the cigarette pack and they see it says what? Smoking is going to kill you. It's not a good idea. And they still do it. What are you going to do with that person until they make a decision to stop? They're not gonna. And so you're going to run into people who just don't value their physical health and wellness that much, at least right now. But there are a whole lot that do, and they just haven't been presented or talked it out with somebody to really get it out of their head and their heart and look at it on the table in front of somebody else and say some things out loud they probably never said before about what's valuable about their health, so they can see the value right now, today, in its full glory. And then $750 is crazy. We used to sell $3,000 of personal training up front. Yeah. That is, the money's not the problem. It's establishing the value. And that's why that front end is so critical.
Yeah.
And on top of that, then they want to know that you actually care about them. And how can you do that when you meet someone in a group and you can barely glance at them a couple of times, So, that's the real challenge. And the kind of group X programming that you guys are doing is so fundamentally different, more sophisticated, more complicated than the standard Les Mills stuff, where people are pretty much just dancing and holding relatively light weights and they're just moving around. It's like being at a dance club and exercising. What you guys are showing people are very complicated and dynamic and challenging and sophisticated ways to move. And that requires a lot more attention.
Yeah.
But if the consumer thinks that what you guys do is the same as Les Mills in a Group X program, and they're looking at price point, you'll lose every time.
Yeah, the message of value, what you're really doing, having your own brand, your own message of value, and MadLab Coach for Life, it's huge. Like I think where we're really going to be going and where the market's going is, we have a healthcare crisis, obesity, diabetes, and that coming at us. Every Western nation knows they'll be bankrupted with the current system in 20 years. And, it's really interesting. You haven't met Ryan Ferns yet, have you, Greg? Ryan? So Ryan's a Senate Majority Leader in West Virginia, and is a PhD or doctorate in physiotherapy. And he's been running these really interesting corporate programs, which delved into obesity and then diabetes, basically direct healthcare reduction, right? And he tried to do it with it was a CrossFit gym. It was like the regular Group X, and it failed. And then he found MadLab a couple of years ago. And he trained up his staff, and he got 4 full-time coaches going. And they actually, the GM is a girl that used to work for us years ago. It's really interesting. I got to reach out to Krista Giordano if you're saying hi. And then they had great efficacy. The program really, really worked well with a Coach for Life, and interviewing each person and one-on-one training and the whole thing, right? Like it's amazing how, Ryan said it wouldn't have worked without a MadLab coach. We've actually signed an exclusive for his corporate program, his obesity and his diabetic programs for all over North America. So, if you're looking to get into that line of work, give us a shout. But a part of that process we'll be doing to do the Rainmaker enrollment and communications course that Greg does, because it really going to be able to connect with your client and get to the bottom of where everything lies is sales, right? So I wasn't sure you knew about that, Greg. That was a big advancement for us recently.
Yeah, I think I did remember you saying that. I mean, the industry's moving this way. I've got a lot of material on this myself. I'm a certified medical exercise specialist by ACE. ACSM has the exercises medicine certification. So it's a no-brainer, right? I mean, the exercise field it's an unlicensed, non-state, non-federally licensed field. And so there's controversy around, how much exercise people should be interfacing with people with disease of any number of sorts, right, and pain and suffering. But I think that the culture is already moving beyond that and recognizing that, managing these conditions is multifaceted. But what's interesting is, even independent of drugs and surgeries and all these other options, the research on exercise is just unbelievable. If you dose it properly, no matter what diseases you have, if you haven't been contraindicated for it by a medical provider, exercise can help many conditions.
And diet,
Now we're talking about coach expertise and their technical knowledge and competency, and that bar needs to keep going up as well. The consumer needs to understand this, and this needs to be explained to them. They don't necessarily know this part of it. And so it's, again, so important to start off properly, to frame that relationship, reconstruct the perspective the customer might have, establish their value proposition at the deepest level, and now you're connected to them relationally, so that even when you transition them from one-on-one to small group, they know who you are and what you're about. And once you get the momentum and you're pushing that ball, keeping it going doesn't require a whole lot of additional energy. And that's the real secret to the MadLab model and what we're trying to propagate, to create momentum in your practice so that it becomes self-sustaining. You'll have to top it off because there'll be people moving, right, and things happen. So you'll have to have the skill to be able to top it off. But once you get to your book of business, you're set, man. You can make a great living doing this, doing something powerful, right?
Taking care of 60 people. Wellness and fitness for their life, and a 10% churn rate a year is pretty healthy, and 6 new people a year, and that's a good living. My guy's been doing it for 10, 12, 13 years now. T-Bear's 13th year here doing this, and he's pretty happy. He's doing well. He's making a good living, and he's not working his guts out, and he's already taken like 5 weeks of vacation this year. He's going to Italy next week for two weeks for a honeymoon. So there's not much that's not happening much in the fitness industry, and it all starts with that client development process. If you really think that you can jam 5 people or 10 people right into a class right from the start, and you can be really effective at changing their health and well-being, fitness, whatever we want to call it, I think you're delusional. You're kidding yourself now, and to really have a one-on-one relationship from the start is what is required, and to be able to communicate properly and enroll them in what you're up to is Greg's the master at. So, proper client development process with the proper training, boom, you can have a good life.
Yep, it's the difference between amateurs and professionals. So.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good place to end it off this week, buddy.
All righty.
Good work.
Nice chatting with you.
Chatting with you.
All right, we'll see
All right,
you.
buddy. Bye-bye.